Hello and welcome to WASH Talks, hosted by the Water Supply and Sanitation Collaborative Council. My name is Eileen Palmer, and I'm very pleased to have with us once again Léo Heller, who is the UN Special Rapporteur on the human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation. Welcome once more, Léo.
Thank you.
I'd like to talk about a recent publication launched by the World Bank, the World Health Organization, ILO, the International Labour Organization, and WaterAid. It discusses the health, safety, and dignity of sanitation workers, and I wonder if you can describe a bit for us the working conditions that these people face, and do you feel that their human rights are protected?
Well, firstly, it's a very relevant report. The issue needs to be raised in a strong way because there are some situations where this type of workers face a very hard working conditions. From the human rights perspective, I have seen some situations and talked to people that protect these types of workers, particularly in my mission in India. In India, there is a very specific groups of persons that are called the manual scavengers. And I think they are the parts of the workers on sanitation that deserves more attention because their working conditions are very, very hard. There are several reports on people being murdered not murdered, killed during the working process, and people that are hurted and get diseases from the contact with excreta. And in this case, there can be also a caste-based discrimination against these workers. So there are different types of workers in sanitation. When we go to developing countries and our developed countries, maybe the working conditions are different. But I think from the human rights perspective, we should focus more on this type of informal workers with any protection on any kind, and particularly when they suffer discrimination. I would say that this is a very relevant situation from the human rights perspective. This situation is at the same time related to the right to sanitation because the sanitation process creates the need of this work and also other kinds of human rights violations, the violation of the rights to work, the violation of the right to live with dignity, and different rights like health and others. So the report is very welcomed, and I think we need to talk more about these types of situations.
Yeah. Exactly, thank you. And you spoke about the linkages with other human rights. And earlier in October, you were at the attended a roundtable in New York, and you spoke about the linkages between the human right to safe drinking water and sanitation, but also with other human rights. I was wondering if you could talk a bit about the purpose of the roundtable and the outcomes.
Yeah, it was a nice discussion. We had with us the rapporteur on the right to education. So it was also interesting to listen from her how water and sanitation are important in education, particularly in schools, the facilities in schools. And it was a discussion that covered how to infuse human rights in the field works of an organization like WSSCC, but also how to connect the right to water and the right to sanitation with the other rights. As we know, the rights are indivisible, interdependent, interrelated. So usually when I go to a country mission and I face a situation of violation of the right to water and sanitation, other rights are at the same time violated, like the right to health, the right to housing, even political and civil rights. The same when I issue a communication to a country addressing a situation of a potential violation of the right to water. Often this violation is linked to other violations. So I think the discussion of the interrelationship between the rights is very key also because it raises the level of the discussion. We are not talking only about the access to the services, but we are talking about the outcomes of the lack of access to the services in the realization and enjoyment of other rights. So the roundtable was very inspirative in terms of discussing these relationships. And I hope that WSCC could exercise more this type of thinking, particularly in the field works of
Yes.
the organization.
Yes, definitely. Looking back over last year, if you could walk us through a snapshot of the progress made in the area of human rights to safe drinking water and sanitation.
Yeah, I would say that 1 year is not enough to assess progress in the human rights, water and sanitation, but we can identify some events and some progresses. One issue that I think it was instrumental was the adoption of a resolution in the General Assembly on the human rights, water and sanitation. It's a very interesting resolution because it talks about menstrual hygiene management, gender relationships, and how it links with water, sanitation, and hygiene. And also there is part of the resolution about climate change and how climate change can impact the enjoyment of the rights to water. And it's very timely because we have in Madrid next week the COP25 that will discuss climate change, and I hope that water will be an important issue in this discussion. So I would say that this is an interesting progress. From the Special Rapporteur mandate, I issued thematic reports, one thematic report on mega projects, and the other thematic report on last year on accountability, this year on,
A very busy year.
very busy year. So this report on mega very important because I could address a driver for the realization of water and sanitation, the rights to water and sanitation. And I started this year to prepare my next reports, one on progressive realization and the other one on privatization. So it was a busy year for the mandate, and I hope that each step of the mandate is contributing to the realization of the human rights to water and sanitation.
Right. And following along with this next year, what are your main drivers for continuing?
Yeah, it will be the last year of the mandate, and so it will be certainly a very busy year. As I said, I'm preparing these two reports. I think they will be an important reports for the end of the mandate. I'm intending to give some key messages for countries, civil society, and the academic. These are very key issues, progressive realization, where I'm intending to unpack some key concepts from the human rights, translating them to the water sector, and then the other about privatization and the risks. It's a very old discussion in the water sector, and I think there is a lack of a more human rights approach on that. I'm planning to visit 2 countries, as always, probably 2 South America countries. It will be also the year of the 10th anniversary of the resolution, the first resolution. I'm planning several events to celebrate it, but not only celebrations, also to raise awareness about the need to include more the human rights approach in the water sector. There probably will be one event each month addressing my reports, my thematic reports, so it will be a way to celebrate and at the same time to raise important discussions. And of course, I'm intending to prepare the space for the next rapporteur to have a very good environment to progress on the mandate.
Right. Fantastic. Coming up on December 10th is Human Rights Day. What message would you want to send to those watching the WASH Talks now?
Yeah, it's very symbolic to celebrate the Human Rights Day, and what I would say is that the water sector, we need to be more focused on the human rights principles and the human rights framework. My perception is that the water sector is very far from the human rights approach, and this doesn't mean that the water sector is doing wrongly everything, but if the water sector is more focused on human rights and the human rights principles and the normative content of the human rights to water and sanitation, things will be better, particularly in addressing populations and groups that are usually discriminated against the access to the services. Mm-hmm. So let's use the Human Rights Day to infuse human rights into the practices and the planning of the water sector. I think it would be a great achievement.
Excellent. And one last question for you. You alluded to it. You will be going to Madrid for COP25 for the UN Climate Change Conference. Is there anything that you can give us a hint to about your activities when you're there?
There will be several activities during the week, more than a week, it will be 9 days. Some official activities, some unofficial activities, some engagement with civil society. There will be also a consultation in Spain about one of my reports. And my main aim is to bring to Madrid the human rights discourse. The relationship between climate change and water is often addressed in the COP, but not necessarily through a human rights lens. So I think it would be great if we can discuss climate change and the impact on the access to water using the human rights framework. This is my main intention in participation in the COP.
Okay, well, we'll be watching you. Thank you very much, Léo.
Thank you.